I've been hit.
Okay, 303 Adams been hit, officer down. Suspect's armed with 20 shells.
You're a loser. That has got to be the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life.
Basically, at trial, the way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies.
I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well.
Randall Moore. Randall Moore's actions in 2009 became an infamous example of a violent crime fueled by obsession, power, and a complete disregard for human life. Moore was deeply fixated on his estranged wife, Theron Lynch, despite the fact that she had taken legal steps to protect herself from his abusive behavior. She had filed a protective order against him, attempting to create a safe distance between them.
I didn't want to do any of this.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, all I wanted was my son. I just wanted to see my 7-month-old baby. That's all I cared about.
Despite this, Moore continued his harassment, and on the night of November 11, 2009, his obsessive behavior culminated in a horrific crime. Moore kidnapped his wife, sexually assaulted her, and then murdered her in cold blood. His brutal actions did not stop there, as he later attempted to escape the scene, evading law enforcement for a short time before being apprehended.
Okay, 303 Adams been hit, officer down. Suspect's armed with 20 shells. Advises nobody come to the door, as he will shoot again.
During his trial, Moore's behavior was disturbing and troubling for those involved in the case. Throughout the proceedings, he exhibited a chilling lack of remorse for his actions. Instead of showing any sign of regret for the pain and suffering he had caused Theron's family, Moore engaged in cruel and insulting behavior. He insulted his victims' family members during the trial, mocking Theron's photographs and ridiculing her memory in a way that left everyone in the courtroom horrified.
She hated you. You're a loser. That has got to be the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm not saying what I did was any better, but I thought the reason my wife was and nagging all the time was because she was just that way. I had several no contact orders on me, and you know what the funny thing is? The day after a no contact order was put on me, that girl was laying in my bed with me, so she wasn't too worried about anything. It was just something to get a piece of paper to keep me away, but then they always came back.
His comments were not just callous. They were part of an ongoing attempt to degrade the woman he had brutally murdered. When given an opportunity to speak in his defense, Moore remained indifferent, offering no heartfelt apology or explanation for his actions. His words were instead filled with blame, and he showed no empathy for the devastation he had caused. Moore's actions and his behavior during the trial sent a clear message. He was a man completely detached from any sense of remorse or humanity. Even after being sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, Moore continued to act without regret. Judge Joel Novak, who presided over the case, condemned Moore for his lack of conscience and harshly criticized him for causing the untold suffering of Theron's family.
The court doesn't allow me to punish you any more than I'm doing now. If I could, I would.
Kamia Gamut. Kamia Gamut's trial in 2018 was marked by shock, contempt, and an unsettling display of defiance. In May of that year, Gamut brutally murdered her boyfriend, Marcel Hill, in a violent outburst fueled by anger. The crime took place in their home, where Gamut attacked Hill with various weapons, including a frying pan, a knife, and a floor lamp. She bludgeoned and stabbed him multiple times, resulting in a brutal and gruesome death. Despite the clear evidence of her violent actions, Gamut maintained that she had acted in self-defense, arguing that she had mistaken Hill for an intruder during the confrontation. However, this defense quickly fell apart during the trial as the prosecution presented evidence showing that Gamut's actions were far more calculated and violent than she had admitted.
Basically, at trial, the way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies. There was a little bit of truth, but mostly I was convicted off of lies.
The prosecution presented witness testimony and physical evidence that suggested Gamut had not only attacked Hill with multiple weapons, but had continued the assault long after he was incapacitated. Her actions seemed to indicate premeditation and intent rather than the panic of a person acting in self-defense. Despite this, Gamut remained resolute in her version of events, and her demeanor in the courtroom was one of extreme defiance. She rolled her eyes, smirked, and even laughed at inappropriate moments, displaying no remorse or emotional connection to the violence she had inflicted. When victim impact statements were being read, Gamut's behavior only worsened as she showed clear disrespect for the grief-stricken family members present.
You were relentless. You stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed until he was dead. I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well.
Gamut's blatant disregard for the pain she had caused, as well as her disrespect for the court, made it clear that she was not willing to take responsibility for her actions. Her behavior escalated to the point where Judge John McBain had to threaten her with duct tape to maintain order in the courtroom. Even as the trial concluded and the jury convicted her of murder, Gamut's lack of remorse continued to be evident. She even went as far as to file an appeal after her conviction, arguing that the trial had been unfair. Keith Allen Ferguson. The crime committed by Keith Allen Ferguson in 2014 left a trail of devastation and broken lives in its wake. Ferguson's violent actions, which resulted in the deaths of two people, his estranged wife, Tiffany Ferguson, and her father, James Weber, were a shocking example of how domestic disputes can escalate into tragic and irreversible violence. On the morning of the murders, Ferguson was involved in an argument with Tiffany over their divorce. In a fit of rage, he shot and killed Tiffany in front of their children before taking them to her father's home, where he murdered James Weber. Ferguson's complete disregard for the lives of his children, who witnessed the murder of their mother, exemplified the depth of his violent tendencies.
All right, Mr. Ferguson, can I get you to stand up there at the podium, please? All right, I need to have you raise your right hand for me. Okay, all right.
Just pull me back my
Okay, stop.
After committing these heinous crimes, Ferguson went into hiding, and it took several days before he was apprehended by law enforcement. The authorities managed to track him down, and he was arrested after a brief standoff. During his arrest, Ferguson showed little regard for the gravity of his actions. He was confrontational with police officers and displayed an air of indifference that was disturbing to those around him.
I'm not getting into any detail of what happened.
If you want to be guilty, you have to say what you did.
I'm not saying all right? Because of the respect and safety of my children, I'm not saying nothing, because they're going to see this. They don't need to hear that. Understand what I'm saying? You know, let's just make this painless and not. Give me my 100 years or whatever, and give me the out of here.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, well, do it!
His trial was no different. Throughout the legal proceedings, Ferguson maintained an attitude of defiance and indifference to the suffering he had caused. Even as his victims' families provided emotional victim impact statements, Ferguson refused to show any sign of remorse. He admitted to the murders but offered no explanation or remorse for the pain he had inflicted on his children or his victims' families. At his sentencing, Judge George M.Z. addressed Ferguson with stern words, emphasizing the magnitude of his crimes and the profound effect they had on those who loved Tiffany and James. Gregory Wright. Gregory Wright's trial was one of the most intense and bizarre courtroom experiences, showcasing an individual who was not only guilty of violent crimes, but who also seemed to derive a perverse sense of satisfaction from his defiance. In 1994, Wright was charged with multiple felonies, including armed robbery and the use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. The charges stemmed from an incident in which Wright attempted to evade arrest after crashing his car into a police cruiser and then opened fire on officers.
All I got to say is I have no remorse for shooting that police officer. He got what he deserved. If I had the opportunity to kill him, I'd kill him.
Wright's criminal actions escalated when he attempted to flee the courthouse during his bond hearing, jumping over a partition in an attempt to escape custody. He was quickly subdued, but his actions raised concerns about his mental state and his disregard for authority. During the trial, Wright displayed an appalling lack of remorse, even going so far as to publicly declare that he felt no regret for shooting a police officer. His chilling words were accompanied by a reckless attitude that further alarmed those involved in the case. At one point, Wright told reporters that if he had the chance, he would have killed the officer. His brazen behavior continued throughout the trial, and he disrupted court proceedings multiple times, refusing to adhere to basic courtroom decorum. Thomas Nuff. Thomas Nuff's case was another tragic example of senseless violence and a complete lack of remorse. Nuff, a man with a criminal history, had been recently released from prison when he reconnected with Regina Capobiano through pen pal correspondence. Nuff moved in with Capobiano and her friend, John Mann, and tensions quickly grew between Nuff and Mann over their living arrangements. What followed was an unprovoked act of brutal violence. Nuff attacked both Mann and Capobiano, stabbing them multiple times before attempting to cover their bodies with blankets and trash bags. His violent actions left the victims dead, and their bodies were discovered only weeks later. Throughout his trial, Nuff exhibited no emotional connection to the murders he had committed. Instead of showing any remorse, he maintained his innocence and refused to accept responsibility for his actions. His behavior during sentencing was chilling, as he appeared indifferent to the grief and pain his actions had caused. John Mann's son, Jonathan, delivered an emotional victim impact statement, criticizing Nuff for his lack of remorse and emphasizing how his father's death had impacted their family.
Your life is not over. You are breathing air and you are on borrowed time. My dad is dead. Regina is dead. Their lives are over. You took my dad from me. You robbed him of the golden years of his life, and I miss him terribly.
Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, committed some of the most heinous and gruesome murders in modern history. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer murdered 17 young men and boys, luring them to his apartment, where he would drug, strangle, dismember, and sometimes engage in necrophilic acts with his victims' bodies. Dahmer's crimes went beyond murder. He kept trophies from his victims, including photographs and body parts, as a twisted form of control and obsession.
Saving the skeletons, preserving other parts. One thing led to another. It took more and more deviant type behaviors to satisfy my urges. And so it just spiraled out of control.
Why the cannibalism?
That was another step. It made me feel like they were a permanent part of me. Besides the just mere curiosity of what it would be like, it made them feel that they were a part of me, and it gave me a sexual satisfaction to do.
His behavior was not just that of a serial killer, but someone who engaged in a pattern of desensitization and dehumanization. Dahmer's killing spree ended in 1991 when Tracy Edwards, one of his intended victims, managed to escape and alert the police. Upon investigating Dahmer's apartment, officers discovered not only the remains of his victims, but also disturbing photographs of his acts of dismemberment. Dahmer was arrested and later confessed to the murders, offering graphic and chilling details of his actions. His trial became a spectacle of sorts, as Dahmer's lack of remorse and his detached demeanor shocked the public. He admitted to his crimes without any emotional display, which only deepened the horror surrounding his case. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Jeremy Christian. Jeremy Christian's actions on May 26, 2017, shook the Portland, Oregon community. The 35-year-old boarded a Max Light rail train and began shouting racist and anti-Muslim slurs at two black teenagers. His aggressive behavior created fear among passengers, prompting several individuals to intervene and shield the teenagers. Among them were Ricky John Best, a 53-year-old Army veteran, Taliesin Namkai Mish, a 23-year-old recent college graduate, and Micah Fletcher, a 21-year-old student. Christian's hostility escalated into violence when he pulled out a knife and attacked them. Best and Namkai Mish tragically lost their lives, while Fletcher sustained severe injuries but survived. Following the attack, Christian fled the train but was apprehended shortly after. Witnesses described him as boastful and unrepentant even at the time of his arrest. His behavior in court further cemented his lack of remorse. He openly admitted to the killings and, during victim impact statements, shockingly threatened the grieving family members, declaring he should have killed them too. His blatant disregard for human life and respect deeply disturbed the court. The trial also revealed Christian's troubling history. His complete lack of remorse and hostility throughout the proceedings made his trial a chilling reminder of the devastating impact of hate-fueled violence on victims, families, and communities. If you found this video informative, consider subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this.